Aloha, and welcome to SUP FM, the podcast for stand-up paddleboarders everywhere. So with no further ado, let's get out on the water and on with the show. Here are your hosts, Nick and Simon.
All right, so Simon, how you doing?
I'm doing really good. How's the weather with you over in Portugal?
Positively sweltering. I had to turn my fan off to start this podcast, but hey, it's going well. I heard that you got in touch with a superhero called the SUP Garbage Man, who's kind of like a mysterious guy. What's the deal with him?
He is. So he's kind of a bit mild-mannered, like Clark Kent, and you never see his face like Batman. But I think he's really a candidate for what we aim to achieve on this podcast, which is trying to cover different disciplines and people who use the sport to inspire others and really make a difference. And he is a fascinating character. His name is Joe. Not sure whether that's his real name. And he paddles the Potomac River just down from Washington, D.C. So he's very, very modest, but he seems to be really inspiring others at the moment through sharing the stories about his efforts to clean up the stretches of the river. And he's getting a real following of people who are sort of increasingly doing what he's doing. So, we came across him, didn't we? We've been talking about him for a while.
Yeah, I mean, that's fantastic because, I think what you mentioned, what you hit on with Maddie LeBlanc in your interview with her was something because she was doing a degree in environmental and the exposure that stand-up paddle causes to environmental issues and how people react to that. And that personally happened with me. I started getting very environmentally aware after I started paddling. And I just think that that's obviously a thing that we'd like to promote a lot. And I'm pretty sure that everybody who paddles is obviously way more aware of the environment and starts to clean up a bit more, which is obviously we want a cleaner planet, don't we?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's not the most glamorous subject in the world, but Joe's really good at obviously rolling his sleeves up. And I think, the thing that attracted us to it, and we've discussed him various times, haven't we, sort of obviously off recording, is the photography and the sort of stories he tells. So I was really keen to have a chat with him. And we both think, don't we, that he deserves a massive shout out from the SUP community. So here he is, my interview with a modest, self-effacing and hugely committed SUP garbage man. Today we welcome onto the show someone who both me and Nick have had a little bit of an obsession with since we first rebooted the podcast back in March. Today we are speaking to SUP Garbage Man, someone who's made it his mission to clear trash from his local stretch of the Potomac River and has cleared huge volumes of garbage just solely using his paddleboard. Joe, it's great to talk to you.
Hey, Simon. Thanks guys, for having me.
No, it's great to have you on. So Joe, something that's that we've noticed coming out of the recent relaxation, the lockdown, particularly in the UK, is a huge increase in SUP, people buying new boards and getting on the water. So could you just tell me a little bit about the first time you saw SUP and how it went when you first stepped onto a board?
Oh, yeah, sure. When I first saw stand-up paddling, I was living in California, and it probably was 2008, 2009 or something like that. I was big into surfing at that time, so to be honest, I thought it was quite silly why anyone would want to stand on a board and not surf. It just was kind of shocking to me. So it was something that I always had in my mind that I wanted to try, but I was like, why would anyone want to do that for real? And then 2013 came around, and we were visiting a place in the Florida Keys, and they gave you a free paddleboard rental. And so I was like, sure, let's try it. And I got to tell you, as soon as I stepped on that board in the Keys, and it was in July, I was hooked. There was something magical about being able to stand up on the water, and then, and if you're familiar with the Keys, it's crystal clear water, and you could see, 2 to 6 feet down at any given point, depending on the depth where you're at. And it was just so cool to see the wildlife from that point of view, way better than I could ever see from a kayak. And then I understood why people would do stand-up paddling. And then ever since then, like I said, I've been hooked. I got my first board shortly after, and then you couldn't keep me off of my. I would prefer the paddleboard over going surfing at that point.
Really?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And you've paddle surfed as well, presumably, since you've been supping.
I have not, actually. I tried once and then fell off because going from the wide stance to the surfing stance became a little bit difficult for me, and maybe it was just the waves that day. But I really liked the peacefulness of like being able to go straight out into the ocean. Because living in California where I was, it was a sandy beach and there wasn't a lot of rocks, so you could just go straight from the beach and just go straight out. And then the noise of the city just went away, and then it was just birds and a little bit of water chop, and it really brought me back to like why I loved being on the water, just being out and being one with nature, I guess.
Yeah. I think that's probably a very familiar story and a very familiar feeling to all of us who are part of the paddle tribe. So, SUP Garbage Man. I mean, it's a fantastic identity. I mean, we saw it first of all on your Instagram profile, and your Instagram profile has got all of those characteristics of very strong social media entities, which is the beautiful photography and pictures of wonderful vistas and sunrises and sunsets and so on. So it looks absolutely fantastic. But obviously, you're dealing with something which is slightly less glamorous than the sort of bikinis and cocktails we see on a lot of these SUP channels. Your story is all about clearing trash, and some of it rather unpleasant trash from the river near you. So just give us a bit of a lead into how long you've been SUP Garbage Man and how did it all start?
Yeah, sure. But first I want to say thank you very much for the compliments. I do put a lot of work into the photography side of it, and I've realized and we'll probably get into this while we're talking, but I've realized that it has given me a venue to showcase like my creativity. I'm not really trying to make it like a creative thing, but it is something that I do put a lot of work into, and it is very meaningful when people tell me that it looks great. So thank you for that. But when I first started, it was SUP Garbage Man. It was May of last year, so it's just over a year. I was out paddling one morning. It was like the first real warm morning of the year, and it was sunrise. And I said, you know what, I'm going out at sunrise. I'm not, waiting for the afternoon and all that stuff. And I went out, and it was awesome to have the river to myself. There was nobody else out there, maybe a boat or two. And if you're familiar with the area here, like as the summer goes on, the boats start picking up, and there's a lot more boat traffic. And so it's just nice to be out again on the water in the middle of the river. The city noise drowns away. And then I saw a white object in the distance, maybe a couple hundred yards away. And so I paddled over to it, and it was a plastic bag with 2 styrofoam takeout containers in it that still had food in it. And I was just shocked. I was like, oh man, like I know there's trash in waterways, and I honestly had no idea how much trash was in this river at that point. But I grabbed it, put it on the board, and then on my way back in, I came across an area where the tide was pushing floating trash into like a little circle up along near the shore in the marina. And I was utterly shocked. I had no idea that was in this river either. And so that was the first time I'd really noticed how much was out there. So I grabbed what I could, put it on the board. It was like, okay, that's it. I'm going out tomorrow morning and putting a milk crate on the board and taking it with me. And so went out, and then I filled up the milk crate with the trash that I found, because once you see the trash, it's hard not to see it. And so I just started filling up the crate. And then the second day after, so it was the third day in a row that I went at sunrise, I brought a second milk crate because I knew how fast I filled up the first one. And then I filled that one up too. And at that point is when I realized that there needs to be some sort of awareness campaign. And at that point, I hadn't really done much on social media. I had a Facebook account from a long time ago. I never really used Instagram. So I thought I was coming up with some new thing where people are picking up trash out of the water from a paddleboard. And I was just like, we need to raise awareness. So that's kind of how it started. And so, the name came after that. I wanted something that was kind of poked fun at myself because many people like to identify themselves as a garbage man. Not people. It just seems like one of those things. I mean, no offense to the garbage men out there, but it's just something that a lot of people would rather not, identify as. So I thought it was kind of catchy. And then ever since then, just seeing the other communities out there on Instagram and social media. There's, the runners who pick up trash, the ploggers, and then there's a bunch of other folks who do litter picking. And of course, I've, seen the plastic patrol from the UK and all that stuff after I had started. And I was just like, wow, so there is people out there as weird as me who like to pick up trash and put it on Instagram. So it just kind of like supported what I was doing.
Absolutely, yeah. There's lots of people as weird as you are out there, and count myself amongst the number as well. And we've also spoken to quite a few of these people on the podcast as well. And funnily enough, I was having a conversation with a Canadian paddler a few weeks ago who's doing an academic study into sort of environmental exposure of paddleboarders, and she's working on the thesis that for exactly those reasons you were talking about, because you're paddling so high above the water, you can see a lot more. Once you reach a certain level of competence on the paddleboard, you start noticing these things and start wanting to do something about it. So you've been doing it for a year as a SUP garbage man. Now, I know that you photograph your finds as well, and you also measure them. So just give us a bit of an idea of how much stuff you've actually removed from the water over the last sort of 12, 13, 14 months.
Yeah, so I measure everything by volume because I know that whatever I pick up, some of it has water in it and mud and stuff, so I didn't want to skew it with weight. And also when I first started, I didn't want to buy a scale because I was really trying to not buy things for this. I was trying to reuse things that I already had because I felt like buying a bunch of new stuff kind of defeated the purpose and the intent of what I was doing. So since I had milk crates already, I just measured them and figured out that the cubic feet of each. And then when I ended up building the big bin that's on the back of the board, if you've seen it in the pictures, measured that, and it works out to about 8 to 10 cubic feet depending on how many crates I bring with me. Is what I have on the board each time. And so I usually just kind of eyeball it, guesstimate it. It's not exact, so obviously it's a little bit more skewed than perfect, but it kind of gives you an idea of the space that the trash that I pulled out exists. And so I try to equate that cubic feet number to an object that's familiar. And so at the end of May, I had up to 1,360, so 1,360 cubic feet of trash removed. And if you recall the recent space launch, when they sent the crew to the space station at the end of May, if you take the capsule on top that held the crew, and then the space where they brought the extra stuff, I guess SpaceX calls it the trunk, that entire top piece, I believe, is 30 feet, 9 meters tall, and the circumference of that, and you take that volume, that's about the amount of trash that I've pulled out of the river since last year.
Wow.
It's shocking.
and all on a paddleboard, which is even more amazing because obviously there's certain operational difficulties with operating on an unstable platform there. So let's just talk a little bit about your finds, because you've handled some sort of pretty big discoveries, haven't you? So what were the worst ones that you had to deal with, and how did you get them back?
Yeah, so I have had a few large finds. One thing that shocks me is how many big things are out in the river. I found all kinds of cones, barrels, and stuff like that. One of or a couple of the most memorable, I found a barrel, it was a rain barrel, 55-gallon rain barrel, blue plastic rain barrel, floating out in the middle of the river. I guess it was closer to one side, but I tried to get it onto the board, and it wasn't completely full of water, but there was enough in there that I couldn't. Speaking of balance, I couldn't get it up onto the board without knowing I was going over, and so I wished at that point that I had a rope or something I could, attach it to the board so I could pull it. And after I've seen it, I can't just leave it there. I mean, I could have just paddled away and been like, oh, well, but nope, I like the challenge of it. So I ended up pushing that thing for 30 minutes with the nose of my board towards the shoreline. And that must have been a sight to see. Just, you get a couple good paddles in and then the board kind of slips off of it and whatnot. But I ended up getting it to the shore and was able to unscrew the lid and dump the water out. And then it was much easier to put on the board at that point. It was empty. But after that, I ended up adding a plastic chain and a rope. I had found both of them in the river actually, so it was kind of nice to be able to reuse that to my setup, where I attached the chain to the leash attachment on the back, and I leave it on the board when I go out, just in case I find something. And then I have a rope in my dry bag that I'll attach to it if I ever find anything I need to tow. And there was one day that I ended up paddling and found a bathtub-shaped piece of floating dock that was 21 cubic feet in itself.
No way.
Yeah, it did not fit into the truck. There was no way I was going to get on the board. There was no way I was going to push it, but I knew I had my tow rope. And so I was able to attach it. It had some holes drilled in it from where it apparently was screwed to the dock or the wood that was on top. And I attached it and then begrudgingly started paddling back, and it just happened to be one of those days where the tide was going out and the wind was in my face, so it was a 45 minute 45 minute to an hour paddle when it was only like a half a mile at that point, because I found it right after I got out, and it was a brutal haul, and I had to flip the thing up a hill to get it into the truck. I put a video of it on my Instagram. It was a beast.
That sounds horrendous. I mean, this must take quite a toll on your paddleboard and paddle. I mean, have you broken any during your recoveries? Because there was a metal bucket full of concrete and all sorts of things you've had to transport. That can't be light for your paddle and your paddleboard to deal with.
No, it's not. I ended up buying an inflatable paddleboard in August because I wanted to get something that was a little more stable, because the hard board that I had, the fiberglass board, was getting scratched up and banged up on rocks, and I didn't want to break it, so I wanted to get something that was inflatable to be able to handle that. And I ended up buying one with a 435-pound weight limit, knowing what I was going to put it through, or weight capacity, and I haven't been able to sink that thing or flip it yet. The amount of stuff that I put on there, I've had one of those like no wake buoys that was 103 pounds, I think. I found a set of three tires. One was like a giant truck tire that was 103 pounds by itself. I had all that on there, and the trick just comes to being able to stack it just right so it doesn't get top heavy. But I haven't broken anything at all, actually, yet, knock on wood.
Good effort. And where do you draw the line in terms of size? I mean, I'm sure this stuff gets silted up, doesn't it? The tires, you have to dig them out. Where would you draw the line? Is it purely a sort of safety line as to if you think it's going to sink you?
Yeah, there are a few things that I've seen that I can't get. The weight, I guess, would be the line. If I can safely get it onto the board, because usually I'm out by myself, and so if I have something that's too large for me to flip or pick up by myself, I don't want to risk hurting my back or anything like that. So it's more of a physical, personal safety than it is the board, because I'm pretty sure my board will handle anything I put on it, and then the weight, and then how high, where am I going to have to put this thing on the board? There was one time I found like a 7-foot styrofoam log. I don't know what it was from, but I saw it, and first thing I thought was I'll put it long ways on the board and I'll straddle it, and I'll put it on top of the milk crates, and and it'll be fine. Yeah, no, that didn't work. Kind of toppled the board. Thankfully, I was close to shore and was able to put everything back because it wasn't out in the middle. I ended up taking that and ended up turning it sideways on the board to make the board, from the top look like a giant letter T. And so it really comes down to like the weight, and then how am I going to be able to put it on the board? Sadly, there are a few things out there that I know that that are there that I can't get currently. So I might end up bringing one of my other paddle boards with me one day and just towing that back if I can flip it over onto that board.
So, in terms of the sort of stuff that you pick out most frequently, I mean, is it plastics? I mean, there tends to be quite a lot of focus on that at the moment. You know, the disposable bottles and so on. What's the largest quantity of stuff that you tend to find?
Yeah, plastics, hands down, is what I find the most. Either plastic bottles from any kind of, and it's not just water bottles or soda bottles. I found, the small little liquor bottles, beer bottles, stuff like that. They're all plastic. Then, food wrappers and things like that. The second most prolific thing I found is styrofoam. There is so much styrofoam. It's either chunks of styrofoam, foam insulation from like houses and stuff like that, or even like the small little pieces of cups that have been broken or food containers.
Mm.
But there's definitely a lot of styrofoam, packing material, styrofoam kind of stuff, peanuts and stuff like that. But yeah, plastics is by far the most.
It's happening all over the Western world. Certainly, it's a big problem in the UK as well. And you've obviously must have had some random and unique discoveries, and kind of known the answer to some of these in advance, because obviously I've been following your feed. For those of a nervous disposition, it's probably worth just turning this down for a minute or so. So Joe, the random and unique items that you've found.
So if you asked me this question about a month ago, it would have been much harder to answer. But at this point, to the reason why we're asking people to turn it down, a vial of blood was the absolute weirdest, strangest, grossest thing I have found. It's the kind that, if you went to the doctor and the phlebotomist, drew blood to send it off for testing, that vial with blood in it was in the river. There was no markings on it, no label or anything like that, but it was right on the shoreline, which had clearly been washed up there at some point. That was shocking. Thankfully, I have rubber gloves and stuff in my bag, and I can handle it. But before that, I could never really think of one thing because there's so many things. So what ended up being the most surprising to me and craziest thing was just the amount of doubles of things that I found. Like, for example, I found a car seat once, and then I found a second one. I found a fire extinguisher, and then a third, ended up finding a third. Let's see, I found trash cans, mop buckets, construction cones, shopping carts, bikes, all. It's pretty shocking how many doubles there are of things out there. So that just means to me I'm going to end up finding a second vial of blood. Really, is what that tells me.
Well, yeah, keep those hygienic gloves to hand. Do you think this is particularly unusual to the Potomac? I mean, is it particularly affected by this, or do you think this is a characteristic of other American rivers?
I feel like this is a characteristic of other rivers. I don't think it's specific to this one. I feel like any large city. The river if there's a river that runs through it, probably looks similar. I don't think this is character specific to here at all. And for example, when I go down to visit my parents in Florida, they live near the Intracoastal Waterway, and it looks clean at first. It's not nearly as bad as here, but I would take my dad's board out and bring a crate or something, and then still end up filling up that crate or finding some large objects back in like the mangroves and stuff like that. So and it's not even a large city, it's a town of 5,000 people. So the fact that you see that kind of stuff in those areas, and then I look at like the area that I live in now, that just tells me that it's just everywhere.
So, I mean, an interesting thing about mindsets and so on. So obviously, if you're exposed to the water, then you'll see this stuff, but you're seeing it day in, day out, sometimes twice a day, is it? I don't know how many sessions you do a day. How do you not get angry about this, or have you kind of coached yourself?
Yeah, coached myself is a great way to put that. I used to I usually only go out once a day. Sometimes there's very rare times I will go out twice, just because of the sorting and the processing and the trash when I get home that I need to do, and then pictures and stuff like that. Just when you have a GoPro, you're taking hundreds, if not thousands, of pictures, so you have to go through all that. So that's why I usually don't go out twice. And I figure if I go out once and I picked up at least a couple things, I still did something. The specific question about being angry, I guess I used to start getting depressed about it and frustrated. But it's not my place to shame anybody or get mad at anybody for it. It doesn't belong in the river, and so I just pick it up. And so I've gotten to the point where I'll find some large object. For example, today I found a barrel, saw it on the shoreline, and I knew if I find something big, there's going to be a bunch of stuff in the bushes right along the shore, right next to it. And I'm standing in shin deep water, collecting a board full of plastic bottles, styrofoam, that kind of stuff. But I get there and I see the barrel and I see all the stuff, and I have a moment where I sigh and I just get upset and be like, this is like, what am I doing? Like, am I doing anything? And I just let that natural feeling of frustration or anger or whatever it is at the time depress. I just let it run its course for a minute or two and just kind of like despair. Just sit there and like, oh man, this sucks. And then I'm here. I have my board. I got to take pictures. People are expecting it. Oh, sunrise. Oh, this is cool. And I'm like, I'm doing something.
Mm-hmm.
And then I just get to work and I just pick it up and then I put it back, put all the stuff on the board, get the board in the water. And then I'm paddling, with a gorgeous sunrise, with the added challenge of, the stuff that I find. And so I do let myself get angry for a second, but then, overall just put my head down and pick it up because it doesn't belong there. So I just kind of focus on that, I guess.
Well, I guess being out in nature and just being on the water is a great consolation in itself, isn't it? Really?
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
So just a final question about the finds. How do you manage them? How do you process them? Do you repurpose them? Do you recycle them? How do you get rid of it? Because there's a huge volume there, isn't there?
There is, yeah. I always want to joke that, just go up the river and I dump it back in so I have something else to pick up. But no, I take it all home, actually, and it's just my wife and I, and so I fill up our trash can and recycle bin weekly, because we have the larger bins that the county comes and gets. But when I first get home, I'll sort through the trash. It all starts when I'm on the board. My milk crates. So the milk crate I keep in the front is for like stuff that I know is going to be trash only. And I'm just going to dump it into a bagged trash can when I get home. So I don't have to worry about picking through everything to pull out the recycling. The bin on the back is reserved for like plastic bottles and heavier bottles or bottles that are full of water or liquid of some sort. You can imagine what kind of bottles full of liquid I find. And so I leave all that in the back. And so that's where the sorting process starts. And then when I get home, I take the bin, the crate with the trash in it, and I dump it into, like I said, a bagged trash can. And then I sort out the recycling that I know, or the plastic bottles that I know can be recycled. So if they're clean, look relatively undirty, I will put them in a few other trash cans that I have, which 2 of them I have found in the river, which I just end up repurposing. And then, I sort and put what I can in our bins, and then any other recycling that I have that is more than my bin can handle, I'll bring it to a county collection point. I'll dump that there, which is funny. I find stuff in those recycling dumpsters, which to me points to the problem of people we don't know how to handle our trash. I found tiki torches in there that were brand new, which aren't recyclable. I found lawn chairs that were perfectly fine, just needed a quick scrub. Cool looking lounge chairs. And so, dumpster diving basically. But I feel if I take that out, it's not going to go to the recycling place and clog up anything, and I can clean it up and repurpose it, so. But I try not to like dig through people's trash. But when it's on the top in the recycling bin, it's kind of like, that doesn't belong there. I'm going to take that home.
Absolutely.
So that's kind of the sorting process at home. And then anything big, I'll try and fit in the can. But when we're not in the quarantine environment, I'm able to use the dumpster at work. They've allowed me to use it for like some of the larger objects. Yeah, there are a few things that I have found that are definitely repurposable. And I did put up a post recently of a bunch of wood that I found and a bunch of buoys and boat bumpers and stuff, and kind of decorated the front of the house to look a little bit like, a dock kind of beachside place. So I don't really try to use the stuff that I found in the river, but there is a lot of stuff that still is completely functional. Just clean it up, get a bucket of dish soap and a sponge, and it's good as new. So I'm not eating off of anything I found in this river, that's for sure. But if it sits in the front yard and looks cool, why not?
Well, there you go, absolutely. And you've also got a little orphanage for lost cuddly toys, I noticed.
Yes, yep. Our little, we call it the friend shelf. I found two or three so far. Little stuffed animals. Yep, they each have a name. That's Mac, because he was found in the Potomac. We have Marble, because he looks like marbles. And then what was the other one? Oh man, I'm failing. I know Chloe. We got Chloe from Secret Life of Pets. And then the mouse. Oh yeah, River, because he's a rat. River rat. Oh no, that was his first name. I apologize. His name is Atui, because he's a rat. So Ratatouille.
Ah, okay.
Yeah,
I see what you did there.
Yeah, yep.
It's, again, this is something that obviously we mentioned about the photos, but the humour running through it as well, and the little stories in there that must sort of really increase the engagement that you're getting. So when you're out on the water, you must see other river users out there. What sort of comments do you get and from them when you're doing your thing?
Yeah, so I find that there's three distinct types of people that I come across. There's obviously the people who like recognize what I'm doing, picking up trash, and they're very appreciative of it. And they're like, "Thank you, appreciate it. That's really that's really awesome of you." And I try to talk to them a little bit about what I'm doing, with the Instagram and stuff like that. And then my overall just, hey, it doesn't belong in the river. I'm not really out here to like make a statement. I just feel like picking it up. And so that's really cool. And there's a second type of person who like will just stare from across the parking lot. I imagine it's because I'm doing something that looks abnormal to the area. And, absolutely it is abnormal. I feel like, once we normalize litter picking, we would probably have more people realize how much litter is on the ground, and then less likely to buy as much stuff or take care of their trash better. But yeah, I feel like there are a lot of people who will just kind of watch and not ask any questions. And then there's another, and then the third is a lot of people ask me, if I'm fishing, or like, hey, did you catch anything today? What you fishing for? Did you have any luck? And I'm usually like, yeah, I caught all this, and they're like, they look at me a little strange. I'm like, yeah, just, fishing for trash, it's, so the game warden, I don't need to worry about, the cops giving me a hard time because there's no size limit or quota that I can collect. The funniest, I tell my wife that all the time, that people ask me if I'm fishing. She's like, how do they do that? You have a board full of trash. There's no fishing poles. I don't understand. Why do people ask you that? I was like, well, I don't know, I have crates and stuff on the board, and I guess that's just a more normal thing to do. And then she was with me once, and we were paddling in the river, not in this river, in a different river around here. And it was right near this restaurant. And an older gentleman and his grandson came, hustling out of the restaurant, and like, hey, let's, see what they're catching, And he asked me, hey, what'd you guys catch? You catch any luck? What kind of fish are in this river? I'm like, no, man, all I caught was this trash. And at that point, I had a plastic chair on the back. The bin was full, and I had a tire between my legs, and then a bunch of other stuff, plastic bags and stuff on the board. And I was like, no, I just got trash. He's like, yeah, but what kind of fish are you catching? I'm like, 2 or 3 more times. He wouldn't like. It didn't click that I was not fishing. Yeah. And my wife was with me, and she's like, man, I thought you were just making that up. But yeah, people just literally cannot see the fact that you have trash. And I think that just goes to like show you is like people, when you can't see it, when you don't see it, it's hard to see,
Exactly. Yeah, it can be invisible, and
Mm-hmm.
you'd think that the fishermen would be nature lovers as well, and be a bit more aware of that. That's bizarre. One of the things that a game that I've seen is the amount of engagement you get with other people. Do you feel as though either other people in other rivers are doing something similar to you, or do you think that other people have picked it up since they've seen your profile and what you're doing?
I know there are other people that do pick up stuff without seeing my profile, but there have been quite a few people who have either seen me in person and then created their own Instagram. There's actually another guy around here who he has his profile SIK Garbage Man, and so that's sit in kayak, I imagine. And so he saw him on the shoreline with his wife one morning, and he said that he had always seen trash in the river and he had picked up some stuff, but like after seeing what I did and seeing my Instagram, he was one of those folks that admired me when I got off the board. Ended up creating his own thing, and now he has his own set of followers. He's fairly new at it, but he's out there doing something. There was another couple out in Washington State that started up a small Instagram as well, based on what I was doing. And then I've had a few people from around the world tell me like I've inspired them, and they pick up trash, or they're going to get a trash picker stick or something like that when they're out on the board. It's just seeing like the level of effort I put into this, inspired them to just pick up one or two things, and that's all I can ask. I mean, I'm not asking for everyone to go out there and get as much as I do. I mean, it's my own kind of self-reflecting time to be on the water and kind of space out and pick up trash. But as long as someone's picking up something, it's pretty cool. But yeah, I've definitely heard some stories where people have taken my lead, I guess, if you will.
And where do you see this developing in the future? Or are you just kind of happy doing what you're doing?
So I started a nonprofit for it back in November, with the goal of in the next 5 to 10 years, kind of growing it into something a little bit more to raise awareness or like sponsor cleanups and stuff like that. My whole thing is I don't want to be specific to any one river. I want it to be I'm just going to pick up trash everywhere, and then I can sponsor cleanups, or if there's an organization that wants to lead cleanup, and they hear about what I'm doing. Say there's a restaurant that I go to frequently, and the manager's like, "Yeah, I wish we could do something like that, but we don't have the extra funds." I'll be like, "Well, I'll use my nonprofit funds to pay for your cleanup. You can buy the supplies and stuff like that to go and do what you want to do." So that's kind of where I want it to go. But right now it's just, with the full-time job that I have, already working 40 hours a week, this is more of a pastime hobby with the side hustle just kind of getting started, if you know what I mean. And I don't want to say it's a hustle. That's just a bad way to put it. Slang, but
no, I know exactly what you mean. So it's been pretty successful. I mean, you've attracted quite a lot of interest, not least when you received an award from the French government, didn't you?
I did. Yes.
Yeah. So tell us a bit about how that came to pass.
So I just got goosebumps. It was one of the very most meaningful, formative things for this whole project. At that point, it was in November, so that was when I was kind of thinking I might want to start this thing into a nonprofit or not. And then I joined a contest. Actually, they reached out to me and said, "Hey, you would be great to submit for this contest," after seeing what I've been with the work I've been putting in. And it's the French embassy here in Washington D.C. And they reached out and suggested I enter the contest for a Wake G7 concept watch. It's solar powered and made out of fishing nets and completely sustainable. I was one of a few groups that had actually submitted to win the Eco Citizen contest that they were putting on for that month. And so in December, they invited me and my wife up to the French embassy here, and I met the France's ambassador to the U.S. We talked for about a half an hour about just different environmental type things, and so that was actually a really, really cool experience. So,
Did you get a good meal?
no, it was too early in the morning. We just kind of
Was
hung
it?
out. Yeah, hung out, did the presentation. It was just cool to say I went to France that morning. So
Yeah,
it was
absolutely.
cool.
Well, I mean, being French, of course, you would have had wine even early in the morning, didn't you?
I wish.
Yeah, cool. Well, that sounds amazing. That's quite an accolade. Particularly this early in on your side hustle. Well, look, I think. I think that's absolutely fantastic. I mean, it's incredible the work that you're doing. What I'd like to do, Joe, is just finish off with a bit of a quick fire succession of questions. Are you up for that?
Sure. Yeah.
Excellent. Okay, so your favourite place to paddle?
Florida Keys.
And although I call this a quick fire round, it's more of a sort of medium fire round because sometimes I ask for a bit more detail. So the Florida Keys, I think you mentioned a bit about it already. Crystal clear waters. Have they got the manatees down there? Is that?
I haven't seen many manatees on the. I think from what I've seen manatees growing up, it's been more up on the west coast up towards Tampa.
Oh.
But I usually. I don't know that I've seen too many manatees down there.
But you get some dolphins down there, do you?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. I like getting in the mangroves. There's a lot of stuff in those mangroves to get. So.
Your bucket list location, so the places that you haven't paddled or you really want to paddle.
I'd love to. There's an aqueduct that I see frequently on the UK Instagram feeds where people have paddled over that. That is absolutely on the bucket list, and then included with that is anywhere over in Europe that's historically significant. I think that would just be fantastic to be able to paddle down some of those rivers.
Yeah, they're kind of opening it up a bit. There's certainly in London. There's the odd opportunity to sort of paddle if the tide's right and so on down through central London. So that's quite cool. And I know there's a race through the centre of Paris as well. So you've got some contacts there. I'm sure you'll be able to manage that.
At some point, maybe. Yeah, we'll see if I can reach out to them.
And, if you were going to paddle with one individual, living or dead, who would you take out on a paddle?
Oh, man. That's a good question. Wow. Yeah, because I usually go solo, right? So they would have to be willing to deal with my trash picking.
Someone who can help you with that heavy stuff?
Yeah, maybe. Let's...
The Rock?
Yeah, let's just say The Rock. You know what? My wife would love it if I just said Dwayne Johnson, The Rock.
Excellent.
I could definitely use some of his help. Yeah, and also he's just a positive dude. He's just a really good dude. So I love his personality and everything like that too. So
he's one of my favourites as well. So that's great. Good stuff. Okay, well, Joe, thanks ever so much for your time. I've really appreciated it. Had a great chat. You've opened my eyes to the horrendous situation you're in, but it's just sort of redoubled my enthusiasm for what we do over here as well. Could you just share where we can find you online?
Sure, yeah. On Instagram, it's at SUPGarbageMan, and online, my website is www.supgarbageman.org. And that handle should work also on Facebook and Twitter if you use one of those two. And I post to both. I post from Instagram to those other two, so it's not a different feed. It's usually the same. So
lovely. Well, it's a quality feed, as we've said.
Well, thank you,
Joe. Thanks ever so much for your time, and we'll see you on the water sometime.
Great, thanks, Simon. Appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to SUP FM, the #1 podcast for stand-up paddlers wherever you are. If you like what you've heard, please leave us a review on iTunes. Until then, we'll see you on the water.